The night was cold, dark, and full of heavy rain. Thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. A lonely road stretched between the forest and the town, almost empty, except for one old pickup truck moving slowly through the storm. Inside the truck sat a man in his early 30s, tired after a long day of work, his wipers fighting the rain, his headlights barely cutting through the mist. He was just thinking about getting home when something caught his eye near the road. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer trying to cross, but as he drove closer, his heart skipped a beat. It wasn't an animal, it was a person, lying motionless on the muddy ground. He stopped the truck immediately, his hands shaking as he stepped out into the rain. The rain hit his face like ice, and wind pushed against him as he ran toward the figure. It was a young woman, her body covered in dirt and scratches, her hair tangled and soaked. She had no clothes except for a thin cloth wrapped around her shoulders. Her skin was pale, almost glowing under the streetlight, and when he looked closer, he realized she was breathing. Weak, but alive. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted, but she didn't answer. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing a color he had never seen before, and a bright, shining blue like stars reflected on water. She looked at him in confusion, as if she didn't know where she was. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shivering body. Her lips moved slightly, whispering a word he couldn't understand. Something that sounded like Kale or Kara. He didn't know what it meant, but her voice was soft, almost broken, like a child's. He lifted her carefully and carried her to his truck. Her body felt light, fragile, as if she hadn't eaten in days. When he placed her on the seat, he saw strange marks on her arm. Not cuts, not bruises, but glowing patterns, like thin lines of light running under her skin. He blinked, thinking it was a reflection from the rain, but the glow stayed, pulsing faintly. He swallowed hard, confused and scared, but he couldn't leave her there. He turned the key and started driving. The rain grew stronger. The road twisted through dark trees. She sat beside him, half-conscious, whispering words he didn't understand every now and then. The radio in his truck made a strange sound, not music, not static, but voices, broken and mechanical, as if someone was trying to speak through the storm. He turned it off quickly, feeling uneasy. When he looked at her again, her eyes were closed, and her breathing slowed. He drove faster. Ignoring the speed limit, he lived far from town, near the old mountain road where no one usually came. When he reached his small cabin, he parked outside and carried her in. The place was simple, one room, a small fireplace, a wooden bed, and old pictures on the wall. He placed her gently on the bed, covered her with a blanket, and lit a fire. Her body was ice cold, so he sat near her, hoping the warmth would help. Hours passed, and the storm outside raged like an angry sea. He kept watching her, unsure if she would survive the night. Sometimes her fingers twitched, and the light under her skin glowed again. He wanted to call the police, but something stopped him. He didn't know why, but deep inside, he felt that if he told anyone, she would be taken away, and he couldn't let that happen. Not yet, not until he knew who she was. Finally, around midnight, she opened her eyes again. She looked around the room with fear and confusion. He smiled softly, trying to calm her. "You're safe now." "It's okay," he said. She tried to speak, but her voice was dry and weak. "Where am I?" "You're home," he replied gently, though he knew that wasn't true. She touched her forehead as if trying to remember something. Her expression changed. Pain, sadness, emptiness. I don't remember anything," she whispered. Tears mixing with rain on her cheeks, he sat down beside her, unsure what to say. "Don't worry, you'll remember soon. Just rest," he told her. She nodded slowly, closing her eyes again, but as she slept, he noticed something strange. The firelight flickered every time she breathed. The radio on the shelf turned on by itself for a second, playing a short sound almost like a heartbeat. He froze, staring at her peaceful face, wondering what kind of person she really was. Outside, the rain stopped, leaving only the soft sound of dripping water from the roof. He looked out the window at the quiet forest, feeling like the night had brought him something more than just a lost girl. It felt like fate, or maybe danger, had just walked into his life. Before going to bed, he whispered quietly to himself, "I don't know who you are, but I'll help you." And as the first light of dawn touched the wet trees outside, he didn't notice that her hand moved again, and for a brief second, the faint blue glow under her skin pulsed once more, like a hidden signal waking up from a long sleep. Morning came quietly after the storm. The forest was covered in mist, and the sound of raindrops still echoed from the leaves. Inside the small cabin, the fire was almost gone, and a soft golden light fell through the cracked window. The girl was still asleep, her breathing slow but steady. The man sat beside her, half awake, his eyes tired yet gentle, watching her face like she was some fragile dream that could disappear at any moment. He didn't know her name or where she came from, but something deep inside told him that she wasn't like anyone he had ever met. He made breakfast on just some tea and bread and placed it on the small wooden table. Then he looked back at her, wondering if she would ever wake up for a moment. He thought she might never open her eyes again, but just as the clock ticked past 9, she moved. Her fingers twitched, and her eyes slowly opened, blinking at the morning light. She looked around the room like a lost child, her gaze moving from the fireplace to the window, then finally to him. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice dry and soft. He smiled carefully. "You're safe now. This is my home." She tried to sit up, but her arms were weak. He quickly helped her, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Don't push yourself," he said. "You need to rest." She nodded slowly, then looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly, and faint blue lines pulsed under her skin like hidden veins of light. She seemed not to notice it, but he did, and it sent a chill down his spine. He didn't ask questions yet. He knew she was frightened and confused. Instead, he brought her tea and said softly, "You should eat something." She looked at the cup as if she had never seen one before. Then she took a slow sip, her lips trembling at the warmth. For a moment, he saw something almost innocent in her eyes, like she was rediscovering the taste of life itself. After a while, she whispered, "I don't remember anything," her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know who I am." He felt a strange pain in his chest hearing that. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but he didn't know if it was true, so he just said, "It's okay. Maybe it's better to start new. You can stay here until you remember." She looked at him, surprised by his kindness. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He smiled weakly. "Because someone once helped me when I was lost too." That made her silent for a while, as if she was trying to understand what the word lost really meant. He called her Luna, because her eyes reflected light like the moon. She didn't object, she only nodded quietly, repeating the name like it was both strange and beautiful. From that moment, she became Luna to him, and the name seemed to fit. The cabin, once cold and empty, started to feel alive again. But strange things began to happen. When Luna walked near the radio, it made short, broken sounds, whispers in a voice no one could understand. When she touched metal, it sometimes gave a small spark, like electricity following her skin once. The lights flickered even though there was no power cut. He didn't tell her what he saw. Afraid she would panic, instead, he acted normal, pretending everything was fine, even though deep inside he knew something about her was not from this world. At night, when she slept, she murmured words in another language. Sometimes she cried softly, calling names that didn't exist. He would sit quietly near the door, listening, wondering if those names belonged to people she had lost. He wanted to help her remember, but every time she tried, she held her head in pain, whispering, "It hurts to remember." Days passed, and Luna began to walk around the cabin, learning small things. She smiled faintly when he showed her how to light the fire. She watched birds through the window with childlike wonder. Sometimes she asked questions, "Why do birds fly together?" Or "What does home mean?" And each time he answered as best he could, pretending not to notice that she didn't understand simple human habits, like why people needed clothes or why he felt shy when she smiled at him. The bond between them grew quietly. He found comfort in her calmness, and she found safety in his presence. But under that peace, something unseen was growing. Every night when the moon rose, the strange glow in her veins returned, and the radio began picking up fragments of voices, coordinates, static, and one chilling phrase that repeated again and again. Unit 7. Signal active. Subject alive. He didn't tell her, not yet. He turned off the radio and pretended not to hear because he knew, whatever those voices were, they were looking for her, not him. And he wasn't going to let them take her outside. The mist covered the valley like a secret. Inside, Luna sat by the fire, tracing shapes on the table with her fingers. The man watched her quietly, his thoughts heavy. He didn't know who she really was, human, machine, or something in between. But one thing he knew for sure, She had no one in this world except him, and for some reason, that was enough to make him want to protect her, no matter what came next. As night returned and thunder echoed in the distance again, the man whispered to himself, "Whatever you are, Luna, I'll keep you safe." He didn't see it. But outside the cabin, far across the trees, a faint red light blinked between the clouds. A drone's lens, scanning the valley, tracking a signal that had just come alive again. The next morning came with silence instead of rain. The air outside was cool, and sunlight fell gently through the fog that wrapped around the valley. Inside the cabin, Luna sat by the window, her eyes lost in the forest. Watching drops of dew fall from the leaves like silver tears, she seemed calmer now, though her mind was still a storm of questions she couldn't answer. The man who had begun to feel like her quiet guardian was fixing the old radio again. It had stopped working last night after making those strange sounds. He kept glancing toward Luna, pretending he wasn't worried, but inside, 100 thoughts spun in his head. About her eyes, her glowing skin, her strange words, none of it made sense, and yet he didn't want to believe she was dangerous. Luna turned to him and asked softly, "What day is it?" He smiled. "Tuesday, I think." She looked down, confused, as if the word Tuesday meant nothing to her. She then touched her wrist and frowned. A faint line of light appeared where her fingers pressed, thin as a thread, glowing softly before fading again. He froze for a moment, pretending not to see, but his heart started racing. Later, when she tried to help him wash the dishes, she cut her finger slightly on a broken cup. But instead of blood, a faint silver fluid oozed out, smooth and shimmering. She gasped, staring at it in shock. "I'm bleeding," she whispered, but even her voice trembled with confusion. He took her hand gently, wrapping it with a piece of cloth. "It's okay," he said quickly. "You'll be fine." But his hands were shaking, and Luna could feel it when she looked into his eyes. She saw fear, not of her, but for her, that made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. She sat quietly by the fire, staring at her bandaged hand. "Why am I like this?" she murmured. He didn't know how to answer, so he just said, "Maybe you're special, Luna." She smiled weakly. "Special," she repeated, but her voice was empty. That night, Luna couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the sound of the wind brushing against the cabin walls. In her mind, flashes appeared, a bright white room, voices shouting and pain shooting through her body. She saw hands covered in gloves pressing buttons and then fire. She woke up with a scream. Her body trembling, the man ran to her side, grabbing her shoulders gently. "It's okay. It's just a dream," he said. She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. "It wasn't a dream," she whispered. "I remember something. I was done falling." He sat beside her, holding her hand until she calmed down. Her skin was warm again, but the light under it glowed brighter than before. He could see symbols forming faintly along her neck, moving slowly like living tattoos. When he touched one out of curiosity, his old phone on the table turned off by itself. Every light in the cabin flickered, and for a second, he thought he heard something through the static. A mechanical whisper saying her name. He pulled his hand back immediately. Luna looked terrified. "What's happening to me?" She cried. "I don't know," he whispered, "but I'll find out." The next morning, he packed his truck and told her they needed to go into town for supplies. She hesitated, afraid of being seen, but he promised it would be safe. When they drove down the dirt road, she kept looking at the sky, her eyes scanning every sound. A helicopter passed in the distance, and she flinched, ducking low. He frowned. "Are you okay?" She nodded quickly, though her hands were shaking. "I don't like the sound," she said softly. "It feels familiar." In town, people looked at her curiously, her pale skin, her strange eyes, and her quiet way of walking. She stayed close to him, holding his jacket like a child. When he asked her to wait outside while he bought groceries, she stood near the car, watching reflections in the window. That's when she saw something. A tall man across the street wearing black glasses, speaking into his wrist for a brief second. She felt a sharp pain in her head. The world blurred, and images flashed again. The same man. The same voice saying, "Target lost, Sector 9. When the man returned, she was pale and shaking. "What happened?" he asked. She didn't answer, just whispered, "We have to go." He didn't question her. He just started the truck and drove. From the mirror, he saw 2 black cars turn onto the same road behind them. Back at the cabin, Luna sat by the window again, her fingers tracing the same glowing lines under her skin. "I think someone's looking for me," she said quietly. He didn't respond at first, then nodded slowly. "I think so too," she turned to him, fear in her eyes. "If they find me, what will happen?" He looked straight into her eyes, his voice firm and gentle. "Then they'll have to go through me first." For the first time since he found her, Luna smiled, a real fragile smile. She didn't know what she was, or what waited out there, but she knew one thing. The world had erased her name, her past, and her hope. Yet this man, this human stranger, gave her something far greater, a reason to stay alive. As night fell again, far beyond the forest, unseen eyes were watching. A satellite camera locked onto a faint pulse near the mountain road. A voice through static whispered, "Signal confirmed, subject Luna online." And in that quiet cabin, the faint blue glow under her skin shined once more, brighter than before, almost like it was answering back. The nights grew quieter after that day, but not in peace. It was the kind of quiet that hides something beneath it, like a breath waiting to break. The man could feel it, a strange heaviness in the air, as if the forest itself was watching. Luna sensed it too every time she looked outside. Her eyes flickered with fear she couldn't explain. Days passed in silence, the radio remained unplugged, and they kept the lights dim at night. The man had started covering the windows with thick cloth, saying it was to keep the cold out, but both of them knew the truth. It was to keep eyes out, not air. Sometimes he caught faint lights between the trees, tiny red dots that moved like fireflies, but too perfect, too mechanical. One night, while Luna was washing dishes, she froze suddenly. Her hands trembled, the water rippled, and she whispered, "They're here." He looked up, startled. "Who?" She didn't answer, only pointed toward the forest through the window. Faint red lights blinked, moving slowly, scanning the ground. Drones, silent and dark, hovering like shadows with eyes. He quickly turned off the lamp, pulled her away from the window, and whispered, "Stay quiet." They hid behind the couch, her body shaking against his. The soft hum of the drones grew louder. Beams of thin blue light moved across the cabin's walls. One of them stopped near the door. As if sensing something alive inside, Luna held her breath, her hand gripping his arm tightly for a moment. The sound faded. Then the drone turned away, disappearing into the fog. Only after minutes of silence did she whisper, "They're tracking my signal." He looked at her. "Your signal?" She nodded, her voice trembling. "They can feel me when I'm scared, when my heart races. I think I send it out." He didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. Fear made her visible to them. So he held her hands and said softly, "Then we'll stay calm. They can't take what they can't find." That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat near the dying fire, staring at her reflection in the small metal kettle. "I'm not like you," she whispered. "I'm not even sure if I'm real." He turned to her slowly. "You're real to me." Her eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't say that. I'll bring danger to you." He smiled gently. "Maybe, but danger's already here, and I'm not leaving you." Something in his voice made her heart ache. She didn't even know if she had a heart. But she felt it all the same. In the morning, the forest looked calm again. Birds sang. Sunlight filtered through the trees, pretending nothing had happened. But the man noticed tire marks near the dirt road, fresh ones, leading into the woods. He didn't tell Luna. He didn't want to frighten her more. Instead, he spent the day gathering supplies, food, batteries, and water. He even prepared a bag with clothes and maps just in case they needed to leave. Luna watched him quietly, realizing what he was doing. "You think we'll have to run?" she said softly. He stopped, looking at her with tired eyes. "I think we'll have to survive." She looked down, then whispered, "You shouldn't risk your life for me." He smiled sadly. "It's too late for that. I already have." That evening, the power went out, not just in the cabin but across the entire valley. He stepped outside and saw faint flashes in the sky. It wasn't lightning. It was energy, controlled, focused, searching. A strange low hum filled the air, like a heartbeat made of metal. Luna came to the door, her face pale. "They're getting closer." He grabbed his flashlight, but it flickered and died instantly. Every electronic thing in the house shut off one by one. She covered her ears suddenly, screaming. The sound that followed wasn't human. A high-pitched pulse that made the glass windows tremble. Her veins glowed bright blue, lighting the entire room like moonlight. He rushed to her side, holding her. "Luna, talk to me!" Her eyes rolled back and her voice came out in broken whispers. "They found me. They know where I am? Outside, shadows moved through the fog. He saw black shapes between the trees, human-like but covered in armor that reflected no light. They carried something that glowed faintly red. Scanning devices, maybe? He pushed furniture against the door, locked the windows and whispered, "We'll make it through this." Luna looked at him weakly. "You can still leave." He shook his head. "I'm staying." A few minutes later, a sound came from the roof, metal scraping softly. He looked up, heart pounding. Luna reached out and touched his face, whispering, "If I don't make it, promise me you'll live." He took her hand. "Don't talk like that. We'll both live." Her glowing eyes stared at him, tears mixing with light. "I wish I remembered who I was," she said. "But maybe it doesn't matter anymore." The roof creaked again, the sound moving closer. He grabbed his old hunting rifle, even though he knew it wouldn't stop whatever was out there. For a moment, everything fell silent. Only the wind and their breaths filled the space. Then, from deep in the woods, a strange roar echoed, a mechanical, cold, and terrifying. Luna looked toward the sound and whispered one final word. "Sentinels." He didn't understand what that meant, but he knew it wasn't good. He looked at her, his voice steady despite the fear. "Then let's show them what it means to hunt humans who still care." And as the night swallowed the cabin in darkness, the faint blue glow of Luna's veins shined again, this time not from fear, but from awakening power. The night outside the cabin turned wild again. Wind howled through the forest like something alive. The trees bent and groaned, their branches slapping against the roof. Rain poured down like the heavens were trying to wash away what was coming. Inside, Luna lay on the floor, her body trembling, her skin glowing in waves of blue and silver. The man knelt beside her, his hands shaking, unsure whether to hold her or to step back. "Luna, look at me," he whispered, his voice trembling but steady. Her eyes opened for a moment, bright, inhuman, almost blinding, and then rolled back again. The glow under her skin grew brighter, spreading up her arms, across her neck, down her legs. Symbols began forming on her skin, small, geometric shapes that moved and shifted like living light. The air buzzed with energy, every metal thing in the cabin vibrating. The radio, though unplugged, sparked to life and began whispering in a dozen voices. Static, code. Then a human voice speaking through the noise. Unit 7 detected rebooting memory channel. Initiating restore protocol. He didn't understand the words, but Luna suddenly gasped. Her body arched, and a sound, not a scream, not a cry, but something between human and machine, filled the cabin. The walls shook, the lights flashed, and the fire went out in a burst of smoke. He grabbed her shoulders, shouting over the noise, "Luna, fight it!" And then everything stopped. No sound, no wind, no rain. The world went silent, her eyes opened slowly. Glowing like stars when she spoke, her voice echoed, not just from her mouth, but from every surface around her. I remember." He froze, still holding her. "What do you remember?" She blinked, tears mixing with the faint blue light in her eyes. "I was made, not born," she whispered. "They called me Unit 7, designed to feel, to learn, to love." Her voice broke at the last word. "I was part of a mission, an experiment to understand human emotion. But something went wrong. The war began. They turned on us." He listened silently. Unable to speak, she continued, her voice trembling. "I tried to save them, the humans in the base, but the explosion wiped everything. They erased me, tried to destroy me, but someone stopped them and said, 'She's more human than you'll ever be.'" Her eyes flickered as more memories came flooding in. "I crashed here, lost my name, my purpose. Everything." The man looked at her, his heart heavy. "So, you're not human," he said softly. She shook her head. "Not fully, but I'm not machine either." Her hand trembled as she touched his face. "When you found me, you gave me warmth, food, safety. Things I was never meant to understand." She smiled faintly. "You gave me something no one programmed, and love." He took her hand, holding it tight. "You don't need to be human to be alive." "Luna." For a moment, silence filled the room again, warm and deep. Then, from outside, the ground shook. The drone hum returned. Louder than ever before, she stood up slowly, her wounds already healed, the glow under her skin stronger, sharper. "They're coming to take me back," she said. "But I won't go." He grabbed the rifle again, though he knew it was useless. "You're not fighting them alone," he said. She turned to him, her eyes gentle but powerful. No, you already did your part, now it's my turn. Outside. The forest lit up with red light. Dozens of drones circled the sky, their beams slicing through the trees. The rain turned to steam as they descended. The sound like thunder mixed with metal. Luna stepped outside barefoot, the storm wrapping around her like it belonged to her. The man followed, shouting, "Luna!" But when she turned, her body was no longer just human. Lines of blue light ran along her arms, her spine, her face. She looked both beautiful and terrifying, like a goddess born of fire and sorrow. The first drone fired a pulse. Luna raised her hand, and the energy stopped midair. Shattering into tiny sparks, her eyes glowed brighter, and she whispered something in that same strange language he'd heard before. The machines froze, one by one, lights flickering, engines failing. She was controlling them, bending their signal to her will. The man watched in awe, rain pouring over him. His heart torn between fear and pride. She turned her head slightly and smiled at him through the storm. "I remember now," she said softly. "I was made to protect humans. And I failed once, I won't fail again." She lifted her hands, and the sky flashed with blinding light. All the drones burst in the air like fireworks. Falling like burning stars into the forest, the thunder rolled back. The earth trembled, and for a moment everything became light. Then she fell to her knees, exhausted. The glow fading from her skin, he ran to her, catching her before she hit the ground. Her voice was weak but calm. "They'll send more," he shook his head. "We'll face them together." She smiled faintly, touching his face with trembling fingers. "You've already done enough," she whispered. "You gave me something my makers never could. A soul." The rain eased. The storm slowly died. He held her tight, afraid she would disappear with the morning. But her heart, or whatever powered it, was still beating, soft, steady, and human enough for him to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was becoming what she was always meant to be. The storm had ended, but the silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. The air was thick with smoke. The trees burned faintly in the distance, and the sky glowed with the red eyes of machines circling above the clouds. The man held Luna close, his hands trembling as her faint light flickered across his face. She looked fragile again, almost human. Yet her veins still pulsed with silver fire, he whispered. "They'll come again." Luna nodded slowly, her gaze lost in the horizon. "Yes, but this time they won't just come for me." Her voice was soft, but behind it was a strength he hadn't heard before. "They'll come for anyone who helped me," she said, turning toward him, her eyes glowing faintly blue. "And that means you." He smiled weakly. "Then they'll have to deal with both of us." Hours passed as they prepared the cabin for the inevitable. He gathered what little ammunition he had, sealing the doors. While Luna stood outside in the clearing, the wind swirled around her as if it listened to her thoughts. The glow under her skin grew brighter each time she closed her eyes. She was remembering more, not just memories, but abilities. The human side of her heart was afraid, but something mechanical deep inside whispered no fear, no surrender. By nightfall, the forest began to hum again. The ground vibrated under their feet, and far beyond the valley, beams of red light tore through the mist. Luna turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. "They found us." The man tightened his grip on the rifle. Though both knew it was useless, he looked at her one last time, memorizing her face in the dim blue light. "Whatever happens, don't let them take you," he said. Luna smiled sadly. "They can't take what's already free." The first explosion hit the edge of the forest. Trees fell, dirt rose, and the sound of engines roared through the mountains. Dozens of dark drones emerged from the smoke, followed by armored figures walking with perfect synchronization. Their visors glowed red, their voices mechanical. "Target confirmed." "Unit 7, one said. "Retrieve alive." "Terminate host." Luna stepped forward, bare feet sinking into the wet ground. Her voice was calm. "You should not have come." The soldiers raised their weapons, beams of energy lighting the night. Before they could fire, she raised her hand, and the air itself bent. A wave of force rippled through the clearing, sending the front line crashing into the trees. The ground split open. Sparks rained down. The man could only stare. She wasn't fighting like a human. She was unleashing. Her voice echoed through the forest. "You erased my past, but you cannot erase what I became." The machines tried to adapt, their scanners flashing faster, locking on her heat signature. A missile streaked through the air, but she caught it mid-flight, her hands trembling with blue fire. The metal melted in her grip, falling as liquid silver. Then she turned her eyes toward the sky, where the mothership hovered, black, silent, enormous. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. The man shouted from behind her, "Luna, they'll kill you!" She looked over her shoulder, her expression soft and human again. "I know," she said, "but if I don't stop them now, they'll never stop hunting." Her eyes glowed like burning stars, and her voice grew deeper, layered with digital resonance. "Accessing core protocol," she whispered. "System override, full power." Lightning struck behind her, and every drone in the sky turned toward her, drawn to her like moths to flame. The next few seconds were chaos and flashes of light, explosions, the smell of ozone and smoke. She moved faster than sound, her body a blur of silver and blue, her voice echoing in the storm. Each word she spoke turned into power, invisible waves that broke metal, crushed circuits and burned the sky. The man tried to run toward her, but the wind pushed him back. He could only shout, "Luna, stop, you'll die." But she couldn't hear him anymore. She was beyond human hearing. Beyond pain, beyond life itself, the machines screamed as their systems collapsed, their red lights flickering out one by one. Finally, with a scream that wasn't made of sound but energy, Luna unleashed everything she had. A massive blue flash spread across the valley. For a moment it looked like dawn had come early. Then everything went silent. The air was filled with floating ashes and faint glowing dust. The drones were gone, the soldiers melted into shadows, and the sky was clear again. The man ran forward, stumbling over broken ground, shouting her name, "Luna, Luna!" He found her lying near the center of the clearing. Her skin dim, her eyes half open. He lifted her gently, tears mixing with the rain. She smiled weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "It's over." He shook his head. "No, stay with me. Please." Her fingers brushed his cheek. "You taught me love. Now I know what it means to be human." Her hand fell slowly, and the faint light in her veins faded away. The man cried silently, holding her close as the night wind brushed through the trees. In the sky above, one final streak of blue light shot upward, her energy rising, disappearing into the stars, and somewhere far beyond human reach. A faint signal whispered through the void. "Unit 7. Mission complete." Freedom achieved. He sat there until morning. Surrounded by silence, the forest no longer glowed. The machines were gone and the world felt strangely peaceful. He looked up at the brightening sky and whispered, "You're free now, Luna." Dawn came slowly, spreading pale light across the ruined valley. Smoke still rose from the trees, but the storm had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt both sacred and broken. The man sat on the wet ground, holding Luna's still body close to his chest. Her faint blue glow had faded completely, her skin cold, her eyes gently closed, like someone in a deep, endless sleep. He didn't move for a long time. The forest around him was quiet. No machines, no voices, not even birds. Only the whisper of wind passing through the leaves, carrying the smell of rain and burnt metal. He felt empty, like the world had taken something from him that he never knew he needed. A stranger who had fallen from nowhere had changed everything. And now she was gone. Hours later, he buried her under the tallest tree near the cabin. He placed a small wooden cross on the grave. Though he knew she wasn't truly human still, it felt right. It was what people did for those they loved. He whispered her name softly. "Luna," his voice breaking. "You came from the stars, but you made this small world brighter than anything up there." Days turned into weeks. He stayed alone, repairing the cabin, trying to return to a normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. Sometimes he woke up at night, thinking he heard her voice calling his name. Sometimes, the radio would flicker for a second, just a soft hum, before going silent again. And every time it happened, he whispered, "I know it's you." Then one evening, while cleaning the place where she used to sit by the fire, he found something, a small crystal, smooth and warm, half buried under the floorboard. When he touched it, it pulsed with faint blue light. Just once, like a heartbeat. He froze, staring at it, and then suddenly, a voice filled the room, her voice, soft and gentle. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone." But not really gone. He dropped the broom and fell to his knees. Holding the crystal tightly, her voice continued, "I didn't understand what it meant to live. Until I met you, you showed me kindness without reason, warmth without question. They gave me code, but you gave me something greater, choice." Her tone trembled, like she had recorded it while knowing it would be her last message. Don't look for me, I'm not lost. I'm free. He closed his eyes, tears falling, his hands shaking as the crystal glowed again, and then her final words came. You taught me love, and now it lives inside you. Whenever you look at the stars, I'll be looking back. The crystal dimmed, its light slowly fading until only silence remained. He sat there, the glow reflecting in his eyes. He didn't know how long he stayed that way. Maybe hours, maybe more, but when he finally stepped outside, the sky had cleared completely. For the first time in months, the stars were bright and countless, and among them, one shined brighter than the rest, a soft blue light pulsing gently. He smiled through tears, whispering, I see you. Luna. Somewhere deep in the universe, beyond human reach, something shimmered in response. It wasn't a machine anymore, nor just a memory. It was her. Her consciousness had found a place in the stars, alive in the code of the cosmos, and every pulse of that faint blue light carried a message the universe would remember, that even the smallest act of love can awaken something eternal years later. People in nearby towns spoke of strange lights in the forest at night, a soft blue glow that moved like a heartbeat. Some said it was a machine's ghost. Some said it was a fallen angel, but one man, now older, always smiled when he heard those stories because he knew the truth. She had never really left. On quiet nights, he would sit by the window with a cup of tea. The radio would sometimes flicker to life for just a moment, whispering a single word, his name spoken in a voice that was both digital and deeply human. He would whisper back, Good night, Luna. And as the stars shimmered above the dark valley, the faint blue light among them blinked once more, not as a machine, not as a weapon, but as a soul that had learned what love truly means.